I'm so thrilled that opera has maintained its excitement in the idea of being live, living, raw theatre. Where else can you go where the whole performance is completely acoustic from beginning to end? It's where the audience and the singers and everybody in the space get to share the same oxygen with each other and the same breath with each other. It's really, it's so thrilling. Well, Ballo and Masca in lots of ways feels like a piece that Verdi might have written when he was a very young composer. There's something impulsive about it. There's something inventive about it, but it's an invention that's quite freewheeling in some ways. So that's also quite challenging, because the question is, how do you reunite all of these forces together? Because Verdi wrote it when he was a hugely successful composer, there is a virtuosity in the way that he pushes together these different styles and ideas. So one minute it's a political drama, the next minute it's a love story, the next minute it's a gothic horror, it's a true crime thriller, and it's a comedy. And that's what's, for me, very exciting about making the piece. Ballo in some ways really reminds me of the Victorian novel, the serialized Victorian novel, in the way that it's quite eccentric, in the way that it's put together. And so we've decided to set the piece in the 1880s. It's about 20 years after Verdi wrote the piece. It's set in Boston, in the East Coast of America, and the 1880s felt to us like a really rich and interesting period to reset the opera, largely because it's where America is founded in so many different ways. There's the explosion of capitalism. There's a huge technological boom happening with the invention of the light bulb and the expansion of the railway through America. So it speaks to the kind of interesting theme at the heart of the piece, which is about hope and the future, and whether hope can ever exist in a world where the realities of things like personal relationships and vengeance and compromise exist. It's my absolute favourite thing to smash comedy and tragedy together. And I think Verdi's really audacious in the way that he does it. I think that it's really fascinating that he comes off the back of writing his big 3 operas, Rigoletto, La Traviata and Il Trovatore, and then comes out with this piece which is so audacious in the way that it slips between comedy and tragedy. When I was researching the piece, I was told that Verdi had 2 big influences, one of which was a real true life murder of Gustavo III, who's the Swedish king. And the second thing is the can-can. And I just think that there's something extraordinary and deeply 19th century and completely eccentric about the way in which Verdi oscillates between the 2 things. But it's what really excites me about the piece. The characters are all really fascinating in Ballo. Like I just said, well, Riccardo is really interesting because he is this man of the future, a man who feels like he has a 20th century charm and charisma. You then have Renato, who is, to some degree, his kind of lieutenant, his second in command, his vice governor, for want of a better term. Renato is loyal and dependable and extremely stoic at the start of the opera. But the events of the opera mean that by the time we see him in the 3rd act, he's become someone who is extremely violent and full of vengeful wrath. It's really interesting that Verdi brings together 2 characters in an illicit affair at the heart of the opera. But those characters are not ingenues. They're not teenagers. They're not young people. Amelia is a woman who has a child, and it's not a baby. She has a grown child, a child of about 7 or 8 years old. So I think there's something beautiful and sad and interesting about the way that Verdi's brings together two grown adults in this affair, people who should know better, to explore how perilous and fragile social constructs are, but how also the human heart is an overwhelming force that can't be tempered.